Hey everyone, welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. Joining us is a distinguished guest today. He's known for exhibitions of his experimental photography and painting, and also working across a range of media and subjects, as well as teaching and writing. Please join me in welcoming Evan Lee. Welcome.
Thank you.
Are you ready for 20 questions?
I'm ready as I'll ever be.
Great. Number one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
Well, I guess as you introduced me, I am a visual artist. I've been practicing, probably for over 25 years now. Um, I make I make art objects. I make pictures, often mostly known for image-based work, but I like to experiment and tinker. If I was to sort of summarize what I've done over all this time, um, I think I like to combine things, maybe things that are unexpected in order to make new things, like mixing traditional art techniques and new technology. To give you some examples, I started out doing a lot of camera-less photography, um, and then lately I've been making oil paintings that they come from digitally manipulated photographs. And I've also been making paintings out of very old material, which is shoe polish.
Awesome. Just a note for our audience, we're kind of building out our visual artist representation here. We had Jermaine Coe on and Garnet Hertz, Dr. Garnet Hertz, who sees himself as an artist as well. And early on, we had Senia Su, who is a great Vancouver-based artist or Lower Mainland-based artist. So yeah, glad to build this out.
Yeah, good people, good company.
Great. Number two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
Uh, it's not, I wouldn't say it's knowledge per se, but I do think that I've consistently approached my art in a way that's very open. So I haven't, you know, I haven't really done the same thing too many times over. My mind is more like I jump to the next thing. And I just kind of really remain open to a lot of different influences. Um, yeah, instead of sticking to my ways more as I get older, I feel like I'm still quite willing to experiment and try new things in the studio. But also, yeah, being open doesn't just mean like looking for new and different things. It also means looking to the past and looking at even things that are kind of common or cliche.
Great. And number three, why this of all things? Why do you do what you do?
I guess I've asked myself this a lot over the years, but I've never been really able to come up with anything conclusive. Uh, I know that I like making things. Um, I like experimenting, and I'm quite curious. And I enjoy stories and ideas, and I think art lets me indulge in all these things.
Nice. And four is one that sometimes people stumble on, but the question is, what does your future look like?
I can see why they stumble on it. I don't know. I don't know what my future looks like. Maybe it's And maybe that's kind of an unexpected thing because I'm actually quite a planner and I worry a lot, which means that probably I'd be, that would make me someone who considers the future a lot. But I think like doing, I hope I'm doing all the right things I can in the present to set me up to have a good future. But that also means I'm too busy and stressed out in the present to really imagine what the future would look like. So I'm kind of busy preparing for a future that I don't know what that's going to look like.
Great. Yeah, that sounds in line with a lot of the answers. Number five, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
Uh, eh, it's a pretty big notion for me. I'm I was born in Vancouver, and I've really only lived here. Um, my parents had to move around the world looking for a stable place. So in a way, I feel like why not stay? I don't have to move around. Why not take advantage of a place that's quite, um, in some ways, stable and safe, but also new and interesting in maybe unexpected ways. It, in fact, even within Vancouver, I've kind of only lived within the same 2 or 3 kilometer radius, and that includes the hospital that I was born in, and even my grandparents are buried in a cemetery that's like about a kilometer away from where I live right now. Um, so yeah, I think I know this city pretty well. Um, it's a diverse city, and um, so with my work, like with my figurative paintings in particular, just thinking of something kind of more recent, I've been trying to depict people and places that I know, but it's also like a city that's changing super quickly, and I want to try and document some of those changes through my painting.
We've just started a second podcast, which is an in-person podcast in a podcast recording studio here in Vancouver in Cambie Village. And yeah, definitely loving being in Vancouver and being settling here and feeling at home here. Number 6 is, if you had to start from the beginning, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Um, yeah, that's another one that I've thought about before, and it it's kind of one of those things where I don't think I would really change a thing. I'm really happy with um, where things ended up. But I often have thought about trying to advise myself to really just trust myself. Um, I think I've had lots of doubts, more than I ever should have, but I think that the good way that things have turned out is because of these doubts.
Nice. And number 7, what's a day in your life like?
My days these days are pretty uh, pretty habitual. Nothing too exciting happens. Everyone in my family, for one reason or another, that's so my family is my wife and my 11-year-old. We're all early risers. So we wake up at around 5 or 6 a.m. Um, and then there's a lot of domestic stuff that kind of goes on before I finally get to start work. Probably around 9 a.m. And my studio is attached to my home. So I make a coffee or a tea, and then I kind of just start working on whatever project I have in front of me. Sometimes that means spending all day in front of a computer, which is not my favorite thing to do. But also that could be like, painting all day or building something in the studio. And I think I like those days a little bit better. Yeah, I'm pretty productive, but I'm also really easily distracted. I do a lot of the cooking at home, so try to fit in going to get groceries or prepping for meals and cleaning up. I like making things from scratch, um, and some things end up taking a really long time to prepare, like if you're making bread or having to soak beans. So I try to have a lot of those things going as I'm working, basically. So I'm running back and forth between home and studio quite a bit. That's pretty much it for the daytimes. Like I said, it's quite routine, and I'm really tired by after dinner time. So maybe a little bit of TV and then bed again.
That's great. And I'm hearing the word making a lot. Garnet Hertz is just releasing a book about DIY culture and about maker culture. And making has definitely been a theme that's been coming up a lot in the podcast. It sounds like you're in that realm too.
Yeah, I think I definitely COVID played a big role in that, and just having all that time to kind of reset and start making things from scratch for sure.
Nice. And number 8, lifelong learning is a popular topic. How do you stay up to date?
Um, I don't know how up to date I am, but I do watch a lot of YouTube, mostly for like instructional videos, podcasts. Somewhat, I went through a big period of listening to like food and culture related podcasts while I work, um, particularly when I was working in front of a computer. And then Instagram, for all its sort of pros and cons, it's really made me aware of a lot of great art and artists that I never would have before.
Great. And what tools do you use? Are you both digital and analog?
Um, yeah, I mean, I use both. I use a lot of traditional art materials and hand tools, but um, I don't. I'm really definitely not sort of super up to speed with like how one might be considered a digital nomad or something like that. Like I'm not a luddite. I've been around computers my entire life, and I do use tech quite extensively, but I like working with like big screens and computer towers that can be tinkered with or reconfigured. Um, yeah, and then on the other, like everything I have is at least 10 years old, except for when we had technical problems. Ironically, that was like a brand new MacBook. Um, and I prefer things to be wired and offline and not on the clouds. Um, but yeah, in contrast, I also did recently get a cheap 3D printer, and so I guess I kind of am interested in both ends of that world, just like I was saying about with my art.
Nice. Yeah, we're trying to extend the podcast into different realms as well. We have a digital twin built out in VR chat in that you can look at in Meta Quest 2, the Oculus Quest headset. And yeah, it's identical to the real thing. It's pretty crazy. Number 10, how do you deal with work-life balance?
Um, I feel pretty fortunate. I don't have a 9 to 5 job, so I was always there for my family, both for both for the early years of my child growing up, and then increasingly now for my parents who are really getting much older. So I don't really feel much of a push or pull either way with regard to work or life. So I guess I'm lucky to be pretty balanced.
Great. And if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
Well, I've realized that in terms of the work I do, I really like to problem solve.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that would make me good in many different areas. I like to think that I would have been a good scientist or maybe a psychologist, um, but maybe those things are just too ambitious. Uh, I don't really know. I can't really imagine doing anything else. Um, but I do really enjoy fixing things too. So maybe I could be a repairman. Um, yeah, in terms of different creative fields, if I was to practice a different kind of craft, I think maybe something that's less that manifests itself less physically, like perhaps writing or something. Because one thing I've become really conscious about lately is just how much materials get used and how many things I produce and have to store. So I think it'd be nice to kind of create um, without producing a lot of objects.
Great. And what would you not like to do with your career?
Hmm. Um, with my career, well, I don't know. I mean, do you mean like what kind of jobs would I hate doing, or what parts of what I'm currently doing do I dislike?
Well, I'll tell you my example. So I went to art school in my late teens, early 20s. But if I didn't go to art school, I would probably be working in the family business realm, which would probably mean I would be working in a lumber yard. And I would definitely not like to be working in a lumber yard. So that's my example.
Right. Um, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting you asked that because I've had a lot of different jobs in my life, and weirdly, my parents also didn't have a lot of expectations for me to become, a doctor or a lawyer or anything like that. Um, I've always found something interesting about all the different odd jobs I've had in my life. So I'd like to think I'd be able to find something I'd enjoy no matter what I was doing. I definitely think that I prefer to toil away on my own and get things done rather than to have to do with anything public facing.
Mm.
I'm, I've tried to expose myself to doing things like marketing, and I don't think I really like that type of work. And also, I really quite dislike making decisions.
Great. 13, what's your favorite word, quote, or sentence?
um, hmm. Well, I'm not going to share any words specifically, but there's a number of nonsense words that my family and I use all the time with one another in different situations. They're perfect to express certain emotions and situations. So I'm sure I'm not the only one who has this, but yeah.
Great. How about a least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
I'll have to go back to my family again, and
Mm.
there are so many words from the current preteen lexicon that are really annoying. Probably right now it's the misuse of aesthetic.
Mm.
And if you don't know what I mean, just check out how teens use the word aesthetic on YouTube.
Interesting. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what word would you choose?
Indecisive.
What keeps you up at night?
Uh, I'm pretty much exhausted by the end of the day, so I've been known to fall asleep like right when my head hits the pillow.
Mm.
Um, I think my real problem is staying asleep. I wake up constantly. I wake up early. Um, I don't know why. If I'm lucky, I'll just be able to fall back asleep. But more often than not, my mind just goes to the usual worries from big things like what's happening with the world, or uh, to just smaller things like the things I'm gonna have to get done the next day.
Great. What's a dream you're chasing?
This is also a really hard one. Again, I just really do feel very content
Mm.
and fulfilled. But I guess my dream is to be able to continue to create work purely on my own terms. Um, and I guess, okay, here's a practical dream. I'd love to have like a lot of space to work in, which I currently don't.
Mm. Okay, final stretch, number 18. What inspires you?
This is another difficult question, and I never really have an answer to this. I love humor. I love comedy. Um, I like hearing stories about people's lives, and also when something goes wrong in a good way, like happy accidents, I think are quite inspiring.
Any advice you'd like to share?
Um, I don't know. I don't think I'm in much of a position to give any advice.
Okay, that's cool. And finally, number 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? What would you like us to follow? Any calls to action?
Um, yeah, these days probably the best thing is via Instagram. I'm not sure if you're posting links, because then I'd have to spell out my Instagram account. I think it's at studio underscore Evan Lee or something like that. At studio.evan.lee. That is my Instagram handle. I also have a website at evanlee.ca. That's basically like an archive of my work. So you can see things chronologically going back about 25 years.
Perfect. Well, so awesome to have you on and to start to build out this art world artist community here, and to see how everyone connects in that way. You're a great addition, and awesome to be Vancouver connected. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.